They say consistency breeds trust in relationships, and I do believe that's true. Our word is our bond, but the big fat question of today is what happens when your word is not consistent in relationships?
The Voices of Victory podcast show.
Voices of Victory.
Vision.
Voices of Victory.
Leadership.
Voices of Victory.
Workplace-related topics.
The Voices of Victory.
Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory.
It's time for the show. You are now listening to the Voices of Victory podcast show.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mario Di Leone.
Welcome back to the Voices of Victory podcast show. Today is all about consistency breeds trust, and trust builds relationships. This is all about communication. This is the consistency of our communication. Think of it as congruous behavior. Congruous behavior is what you say and what you do actually matches. So I'm going to dive into this crucial topic because this is all about inconsistency with language, inconsistency with words, and it can impact your relationships. And sometimes the most painful type of relationships are ones that are actually inconsistent with speech and words and inconsistent with behavior. It's not just the words, but the words and the behaviors really aren't lining up. They're not matching up. And this goes down the path of avoidant behavior, although today's topic is not about avoidant behavior. There's about 1 million people doing that topic. We're talking about the root level below that, and that's the consistency that is all important and all crucial. And what can we actually do about it? Well, the key is building trust. You have to build trust, and you have to build it through stability. You're building stability, and you have to set clear boundaries as well. You have to know your worth, and you have to know what you want and know what you stand for as well. So setting those clear boundaries are all about expressing what your needs are and making sure your expectations stay realistic. And some people will state their expectations, and those expectations can be really lofty. And what I mean by lofty is they're up in the clouds. It's not realistic. It's not grounded. They're thinking of all kind of fantasy things where the relationship doesn't really line up and match reality. It's more of a futuristic projection of things. We have to make sure the expectations stay realistic. We have to cover what not to do. So ignoring red flags as well, because red flags will come up in regards to communication. And if we keep making excuses for their behavior and make excuses for their communication or lack thereof, then we set ourselves up for failure, because the key point on this entire podcast episode today is consistency is a two-way street. Let me say that again so you burn it into your nervous system. Consistency in relationships is a two-way street. What they say and what they do should match. And if there's inconsistency, it's going to hurt that relationship. But consistency is a two-way street. It has to happen on both ends. It's a must. It's not a nice to have or an ought to or should. No, it has to happen, and it has to happen clearly. If you're a person that values communication on a scale of 1 to 10, and we'll say it's up in the 8, then communication deserves consistency. Avoid choosing or dating anyone who's inconsistent with their behavior and inconsistent with their speech. Believe me, because you yourself, should you choose less than that, and you will kick yourself in the head and beat yourself up when it comes to your own integrity and how you held yourself to the standard of the relationship. So inconsistency in any relationship, it can wear down and grind down trust. When what you say and what you do does not match, it will impact you. There is no getting away from that. When someone acts unpredictably, it creates tension, creates a lot of uncertainty. And if it's a guy and they're acting uncertain and they're unpredictable and their speech doesn't match what they say and what they do, they don't line up, and you're just gonna ruin your female partner's nervous system because they need to feel safe. And in the case of creating tension and uncertainty, it's all about failing to match what you say and what you do. Because you never know what to expect, and over time, that can make you feel uneasy or unsure, and you can make your partner feel unsure about the connection. And that's when it comes down to the nervous system, is that if you're constantly making your partner feel unsure, well, they could just bolt on you. They could just disappear. It's no wonder why ghosting actually does happen. Now, sometimes you could be consistent all the time and they still ghost you. I'm not saying that. I am saying that people will ghost very easily, but ghosting is not the topic here today. The way to fix this is to build trust through stability, through being stable, being grounded. And if you're a guy, you need to be grounded, all right, for your female partner. Very grounded. What you say and what you do has got to line up. Be a man of your word. In the song House of Pain, word is your bond. Back in the 90s, they say, word is bond. They used to say that. What that really meant is what you say and what you do really lines up. And that was a 90s hip-hop quote. So when your actions are steady and reliable, if you're a man and your words are steady and reliable, that relaxes the nervous system of your partner. All right? And that's so important. Now, it gives other people a clear sense of where you stand, and it becomes a foundation and a backbone for any strong relationship. So you have to be clear. Be clear on how you communicate, because it's just as important. You have to say what you mean and mean what you say, because the vague little words and vague little hints or staying silent, it only leads to more confusion, only leads to more frustration. The boundaries are a part of this as well, because if you are dating, you haven't really crossed that area where the relationship can flourish. You're not even there yet. So boundaries are a part of this, because you have to be able to show the other person what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept. I'm willing to accept X and not Y. So following through on those boundaries isn't being inflexible. It's showing that your feelings and your time actually matter, and that you have to expect that same respect in return. Patience is necessary. Rushing to fill the silence in a conversation is part of that impatience or oversharing. But you know what? You have to regulate your speech, and patience is necessary, but patience also has its limits, like anything. And trust doesn't happen overnight. Relationships need time to prove themselves. And a lot of times, what we can do is extend the first part of the connection, and they have to extend it back. So where the consistency builds trust is when we're constantly seeing equal action. And you shouldn't sit and wait and expect. You should sit and observe. All right. So if you're sitting and expecting, she has to call back, and you're like, doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you're expecting them to call back. Why aren't they calling back? Why aren't they playing that little game that goes on? That's not what I'm talking about. You don't sit and expect. You don't sit and wait. You detach yourself emotionally, and you simply observe. Energy begets energy. The energy that they put into it consistently deserves yours. But you have to also understand your energy begets energy as well. What you put out comes back, right? And if you see that it's inconsistent and you really love them and you really care about them and you really like them, if you're inconsistent, I want to make this so clear. This would be for the ladies. If you're inconsistent with your speech and you love that man and you care about him and he's everything to you, and you love him and you're in love, and he's not being consistent with you all the time, then guess what? That's going to destroy trust. Now, here comes the downward part. The downward part is if a woman makes an excuse for the man's behavior. Oh, he's just having a bad day. Oh, it's just this. Always making an excuse for the lack of consistency and always making an excuse for the lack of communication, then you're selling yourself short. You are literally falling short in that relationship. And some people will say, oh, but some people have their own communication style. No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not here to talk about communication style, because I don't care about that right now, not on this episode. What matters is if you yourself value communication on a very high level, and the partner that you love is being inconsistent all the time, and you have to reconsider, because the more you give in and the more you make excuses, you lower your value, you lower your self-worth. Your self-worth will slowly evaporate. Because why? It's real simple. You're breaking promises to yourself. And the worst promises that we can break are the ones that we make to ourselves. Keep that in mind. So Trust doesn't happen overnight, and relationships need that time to prove themselves. Trust begets trust, and you have to be able to observe without expectation what's going to come back, how it's going to come back. And if it doesn't, you got to be willing to move on. You have to set kind of a time limit, or you have to make your own closure, shut your own door at some point. Very important. Consistency goes both ways. You can act steadily and clearly, but you also need to notice and observe if the other person does the same. Trust is not one-sided. If someone repeatedly fails to show up in a relationship, that's a sign to step back. That's a big sign to step back. But it's also important to recognize what not to do, what to avoid. You have to understand, if you ignore warning signs just to stay in a relationship and make excuses for someone else's inconsistency, it only causes more stress, and you'll just find ways to rationalize whether or not that relationship should stay in your life. You rationalize it in your own head. You make it come out right in your own mind. And excuses might feel kind, but they usually hide the pattern that the other person has in regards to their hurt and how that hurts you and how it hurts the trust. So you have to be honest with yourself. And being honest with yourself is all about what's happening, even when it's uncomfortable, because it does protect your peace. Protecting your peace is valuable, but also having a stance that you're not going to tolerate certain things is also important. So you have to have that balance there, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's hard, because it's not about being harsh. It's about knowing your own limits and being able to stand by them. Because if you break promises to yourself, what that will do is you'll hate the other person. Resentment will grow. You'll say, you did this to me. You're almost like finger point the other person, but you broke that promise to you. And then you scapegoated the other person. The other person becomes like a scapegoat for it. That becomes a problem. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. So having that self-respect is not breaking promises to yourself. And self-respect, it sits at the center of everything, which is crucial. So when you have and act consistently, you got to stick to your boundaries, and you got to communicate early, and you have to be showing that you value yourself. And healthy relationships happen when both people feel safe and totally understood. And when you handle your side, your steadiness, your patience, and your honesty, you set that tone that encourages trust and balance. And if you're a guy and you actually communicate that steadiness and patience and honesty, you're actually communicating that grounded nature of who you are. So consistency isn't just a habit. It's what keeps your relationship totally solid, and it keeps your self-respect intact. If you're inconsistent with people, people will let go of respect for you. They will lose respect for you when you're inconsistent, because you have to be able to hold to your promise. And again, the worst promises are the ones that you break to yourself, but the damage that happens from breaking trust of another person can destroy relationships completely. You have to hold to your value. You have to hold to your own worth. Your word is your bond, back to the 90s, and never, ever, ever forget that. Take care and have a good day.